Hi, and welcome to All Things Divorce Podcast. I'm Launi Sheldon, the host of All Things Divorce Podcast, and I'm here today with Jennika McKusick. And today she's going to be talking to us about managing clients' expectations during their divorce or separation or split. Jennika is a partner with the law firm of Jeffrey G. Pollitt. And prior to being admitted to the bar, this is what I love about Jennika. You're such a rare find. Jennika was his paralegal. Is it for 6 years prior to graduating?
If you want to go back all the way to my origin story, I was the receptionist at Jensen and Pollitt, and
No way.
Yeah, I was placed there through a temp agency, and then they asked me to stay on. Bob, Bob, so
right.
Bob, just basically walked up to me and he was like, "I'm about to pay this check, to buy you from the temp agency. You better stick around in Bob Jensen's way." And then about 3 months later, Jeff made me his legal assistant. And then just a few months after that, he told me that I shouldn't play checkers if I know how to play chess. And so he made me go to law school, but he made me go to Phoenix School of Law, which is Arizona Summit now, because they had a part-time program, because I was also required to work full-time when I got my law degree.
Yeah, I was shocked. That's a lot. I mean, law school's a lot, and being a legal assistant and a paralegal is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, both of those are more than full-time, right? Even if you're part-time law, it's more, but yeah, that takes a special kind of person. So anyway, so great. I'm so glad that you did it. And we love Jeff. So,
yes.
So Jennika has now developed her own successful practice in divorce, child custody, child support, spousal maintenance, those kinds of things that, any of your divorce needs. Jennika is passionate about family law, and she takes great pride with her work, and especially in her relationships with her clients. And I do know this, from personal experience working with Jennika on a case. She does great work. So she's also has served on the board of the Maricopa County Bar Association's Family Law Section for 9 years. And as a member previously as the past chair-elect and secretary. In 2020, Jennika joined the Family Law Executive Council for the State Bar of Arizona. And so through her work with Maricopa County Bar and the State Bar, Jennika helps develop and coordinate several continuing legal education seminars, and she helps facilitate functions with judges and lawyers to get that bench bar camaraderie kind of thing going. So she also works with law students to prepare them for taking the bar exam. So she's a really wonderful volunteer, a mentor, and does great work. So as usual on our podcast, this podcast is not meant to give specific advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. And we do hope that you can use some of the gems that we provide you with. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client privilege. And although the information discussed is from Arizona, Jennika is only licensed in Arizona, as am I. But you can use some of this information in other jurisdictions, look up the laws in your area, and talk to an attorney in your jurisdiction, and see if any of this can ring true with the lawyers in your area. And I think specifically this will, because this is really managing clients' expectations. So Jennika is going to talk about managing the expectations and kind of what she does. So Jennika, what do you see as the struggle that most people have when dealing with divorce?
So divorce is like a special little beast within the legal world, because you're not just dealing with property. This is your family, these are your children, this is your money, this is what you've built, you've spent years building. And so there's a really heavy emotional component that goes with divorce litigation. And I never really understood that phrase, there's a thin line between love and hate, before I started working in divorce law, because these are people who were so passionately enamored with one another that they thought it would be great to get the government involved and marry each other. And now they cannot stand each other, so much so that they have to tear apart everything that they built together in order to feel okay. And so the biggest struggle I see is people sort of reframing their minds from that point when they were starting their relationship and the promises that they made to one another, and now to this point where that relationship is ending, and their expectations about what is going to result from the divorce litigation and how things are going to change are often sort of unrealistic. And the biggest struggle that I have is sort of trying to walk you back and actually have you look at the reality of the situation, look at the reality of the dynamic that got you here, and get you from a point of resistance to acceptance. Because that's the main crux, is that if you can actually look at the situation and then you can understand, like, your marriage failed, you're in a grief cycle, anger is going to be part of it, bargaining is going to be part of it, sadness is going to be part of it. If you just realize that that's what you're going through, and sometimes have empathy for the other side, that they're going through it too, and then you start making your decisions based on the fact that this is a failed marriage and we have to sort of recreate our relationship in order to make it work, particularly if we have children, then people can start to make better decisions, particularly about their interpersonal communications through the process of divorce.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I've been divorced. I think everyone knows that on this, twice actually. And I think when you said the interpersonal communication between the two of you, and that you have to have, this is a new relationship. It is. And it's such a weird new relationship because, if you were the bossy one, you don't get to boss around anymore. Yeah. And I know I've had so many clients that were so upset because they were so used to being the controlling person in the relationship. And all of a sudden they have no control left, and it freaks them out, right? It's just, lack of control sucks when you're a person that likes to be in control.
Well, and think about that. You and I had a very brief conversation before the recording started about, like, not letting fear drive you, not living in fear, but how scary it must be with not knowing how this relationship is going to change. And then I always tell my clients, because you see the dynamic, there's generally one who sort of runs the ship, and then there's generally one who sort of is just on the ship.
Right.
The divorce process is always harder for the captain of the ship because they're so used to being in control. And when you file a petition for dissolution, this is no longer something you can control. Like, it's a ship that's going to get to the station, and you're not going to get to tell the other person what to do anymore. And the person who's used to being told what to do just fares better, because that's essentially the nature of what happens. You're on a ride. So it's more comfortable for the person who is used to not being in control than it is for the person who's used to, like, no, I'm going to manage the finances. No, I'm going to control what's spent and where. You don't have that anymore.
And I'm going to control what the kids do. And I've always been in control of, the extracurricular activities and what they're doing and their school, and you lose that, and it sucks.
Yep. And it's scary.
It's super scary. And, there's already so much fear in divorce, of the unknown, especially when you have people who were married, when they were 20, and now they've been married 45 years or 40 years. And they're stay-at-home parent. They don't, all of a sudden they have no idea how they're going to get finances. And that's, so you've added on, the scariness of the unknown, the scariness of the no extra income coming in, and the scariness of the lack of control.
Yeah. And if you think about people from, like, an animalistic perspective, right? Like, you get a dog and you back that dog into a corner, like, that thing is scared, right? But 9 times out of 10, it's not going to act like it's scared. It's going to bare its teeth. It's going to bark. It's going to try to bite you. I mean, that's, I think, a realistic way to sort of expect a human to behave when they feel backed into a corner too. It's not always cowering in fear. Sometimes it's this display of just the most insane behavior in the world. And sometimes you just got to let that ride. The worst thing that you can do is feed into that
Yeah.
narrative or react to that narrative, because it teaches a person that, hey, if I act this out of control way, I get a reaction. And that's ultimately, the best advice I give my clients is to just be really aware what is in the sphere of your control. What do you control? And then stop trying to control this other stuff. What do you control? Do what's right within that sphere of control, and then let the chips fall where they will.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's hard to do. It's probably hard to take, but it's great advice. So, you know, and here it's one of the questions that I was going to ask you is, how do you help clients deal with their ex-spouses in family law litigation? So I know that there's a lot. I'm gonna go off the script, off of what we discussed for a second, just because I that's such a great question. But I think it can go even further. So the question is, how do you help clients deal with their ex-spouses in family law litigation? But also, do you let your clients deal with their spouses during the litigation, or do you prefer to be the one that's communicating and sort of running the show? Because it's if they can. My position always was, look, if you can get your client to agree to something because right now they're feeling guilty or whatever, do it.
Yeah.
But be careful of what you're having them sign. Let me see it first or whatever. But what are your thoughts on that? I know some people have the exact opposite, like, no, I'm dealing with it because they're going to screw it up.
Yeah, and I kind of make that decision on a case by case basis. I have clients who I think are able to communicate with the other person. And then I have clients where the dynamic is so toxic that they're not going to make any progress if they're communicating directly. But then particularly if there's a opposing counsel on the other side with whom I get along and somebody I respect and know is going to do the right thing, then I prefer to try to work things out with them directly. One of the things I constantly tell my clients, particularly when they remain in communication with the other side, is don't get upset about something until I tell you you need to be upset about it, because the other side is wanting you to be upset. The other side is wanting you to feel guilt. They're wanting you to make decisions out of those negative feelings. And that's the worst place to make a decision. You want to be able to sort of detach your emotional brain from your clear thinking logical brain when you're trying to make decisions about your future. And too many people don't do that. And so usually I don't mind most of the time if clients speak to the other spouse. I do mind if it's causing them to deteriorate in their own mental health. Then I like to try to put the brakes on that and say, you know what, let's talk about divorce things through counsel, and we can talk about these things directly. But I think that stepping in and taking over 100% of that communication isn't healthy or realistic for the client, because at some point my involvement ends. And then particularly if they have children, their need to continue to communicate with the other side continues. And I want them to be armed with the tools that they need in order to be able to do that and then remain healthy and keep their dignity. That's the other thing.
Absolutely.
You don't want to continuously sink down to the level of whatever communication you're receiving. You want to be able to stay above the fray because you feel better. Toxicity is contagious. If you're constantly hanging around with people who are toxic, you will yourself become toxic. It's almost impossible to stay above the fray. But in the same sense, on the counter of that, happiness is contagious, health is contagious. And so if you're doing better, if you're being healthy, and you're getting happy and you're learning how to manage what's in your sphere of control and letting go of everything that's not, and not accepting the narrative that's being sent your direction. Just, you don't have to dispute it. You don't have to argue your point. You just have to say, I disagree, and be okay and move on. If you obtain that skill, sometimes that inures to your benefit. Sometimes that trickles down, and then the other side starts behaving better because they don't want to be the only person wallowing in insanity. You're getting healthy, so sometimes they step up their game and they get better.
Yeah, and speaking of the communication with them, I used to have to tell my clients, listen, they're gonna lie to you. That's, don't believe what your ex is saying. Talk to me first.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, what the house is worth. Don't buy into the stuff that somebody's
Yeah.
telling you. Don't buy into, that they're only making this much money now if they were making twice that, a month ago.
Yeah.
You know, they know how to manipulate each other. They've been doing it probably for a lot of years.
Successfully for years. Yeah.
Right. And now is the time that you count on the attorney
Yeah.
as opposed to your ex, because they're not in it. And again, you also have people say, well, that's not who I married. This is a good person. You never, ever, ever know. You never know who you married until you divorce them.
Yeah, true.
And they can become a completely different person. When money's involved, when fear is involved, when anger or frustration or betrayal is involved, they're not the person that you married anymore.
Yeah, or you had unrealistic expectations about who this person was. I mean, there's so many different things that could play into what results in this point where you are litigating against one another. And one of the craziest things I see, and it's probably one of the things I really try to walk people off of the ledge over, is this idea that through this litigation, you will be vindicated, right? Like,
you hope, right?
At the end of this, the other side will see the error in their ways. And, there's like a moment where they're going to walk, like on Game of Thrones, they're going to walk down the middle of the street in sackcloth and shame, guilt, shame, it doesn't happen. And even in instances where we as lawyers go to court and say we clean the board, we get everything that we wanted, and the judge says we're right on every single issue. The other side doesn't go, I was so wrong. No, they're like, you were sleeping with the judge, or she was sleeping with the judge, or everybody was sleeping with the judge, or the judge is, on drugs. It's never a moment where they're like, yes, I was wrong. That doesn't happen. And so I always encourage people to settle, because particularly if what they're going to court for is this moment of vindication, talk about disappointment. Like, that expectation needs to be managed, because that is not a result of litigation, period.
That's very true. That's very true. Because it's, divorce sucks. I mean, there's nothing really great about divorce.
Except having really fantastic legal representation.
Right, for sure. I mean, because to go through the divorce, you've already gone through something bad, typically.
Yeah.
And so, it might be better than the alternative of staying married, but it's still a really difficult process to go through.
Yeah.
So what do you do if the other side is just terrible?
That happens a lot. And like, when I'm talking about somebody being really, really terrible, I'm talking about, people who either have like the traits of some of those high conflict personalities, like Bill Eddy. I love him. Megan, I love them. They really put me onto these high conflict personalities where you're like, and people throw this term around way too loosely, but like narcissists or borderlines or antisocials or histrionics, right? You have these personalities that are just like wired to fight. And when you have somebody like that on the other side, the number one thing I try to get my client to do is just realize, like, number one, they're not going to change.
Yeah.
The only thing that you will ever do is change yourself, change your own expectations. And there's a crazy thing that happens when you shift from going, they shouldn't be doing that, to going, they did it again. There's something that changes when you just
powerful.
You expect the bad behavior as opposed to expecting at some point they're going to stop. When you expect the bad behavior and then you plan around it, you're golden. Once you start realizing, hey, this is the reality, and accepting that reality, and stop trying to force a different reality. This is what you control, just you. So control yourself. And that includes your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions. You know, that's the hardest thing to get across, particularly in such a heavily emotional arena. But you are absolutely 100% in control of your emotions. And anger is always a secondary emotion, right? Like nobody is ever just angry. Like usually you're sad first, and then that sadness becomes anger, or you're disappointed in how the other person behaved, and that becomes anger. You let the anger go. You know, it's okay to be sad, but don't dwell there.
Right.
You have to choose to be happy. You have to choose to be healthy. Don't let the other person drag you down. If anything, try by your own behavior to pull the other person up and to start behaving in a more rational way, particularly if you have kids, because you're modeling behavior to your children. Right. And how many times have we talked about, you know, the concepts of alienation and child custody cases? And you see these kids who are just crazy resistant to parenting time to one parent, and they're aligning with another parent. That dynamic never exists when there isn't a high conflict relationship between the parents. There's never two parents who get along and then all of a sudden one of the kids says, I don't want to see this person anymore and I'm aligned. You have to have that specific conflict dynamic in order for alienation to occur.
Yeah, I remember telling a judge one time, I had a client who had gone to jail for like a DUI or something. And when the client got done, the other parent had said whatever he had said to the kid. And the kid just didn't want anything to do with mom. Mom was, you know, a piece of crap because she was in jail. And actually, I think that she was in jail and then she was being deported. I think it was like kind of a both thing. Like she was here, you know, without papers and I'm
sorry, I should say that without papers.
Yeah, without undocumented, whatever it is. But she ended up being gone for like 11 months. And when she came back, the kids just hated her. And I told the judge, I said, look, judge, there are military people who go away for years and they come back and their kids are happy and excited to see them.
Yeah.
So the only mom could not have done anything while she was gone to cause the kids to behave this way. There was no money to have like custody evaluations and stuff. We did have someone like a limited scope talk about that there was some alienation. And they did some reunification, but kids don't just hate a parent just because. The parent has to have done something significant, because even abused kids typically love their parents. Right. And so the judge didn't buy into it. But it was one of those things where you know, a kid's wired to love their mom and all of a sudden their mom's gone for 11 months and the kid hates the mom.
Yeah.
Well, the only way that the kid knew anything negative about the mom was because of the dad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a hard one for sure.
Yeah. But if you think about it though, like when you realize that your kids are in the balance, because like from my perspective, I've represented the favored parent before, and I think it's really easy for the favored parent, like, you know, there are intentional alienators, but then there are naive alienators.
Oh, and I think most of them are naive and
I think so too, because it's so easy when you hate the other side.
Right.
Like, well, of course my kid doesn't love that person because of how strongly but you don't realize like your kid is feeding off of you, and then
right.
You're giving like these silent cues to the child when they say something negative about the parent. You're giving these silent cues of like acceptance and like, yes,
right.
You know, I agree. Oh, look, your dad is doing it again, or oh, your mom is doing it again. That happens, but it happens not because of the child's conflict with the parent necessarily, but it happens because of your conflict with them.
Right. And it's hard. That's a hard one because you don't want to negate the child's feelings about the other parent, but you don't necessarily want to jump on board. You don't necessarily want to defend the other parent if the parent's doing something bad. So that is a really hard, you know, it's a little tiny wire that you have to walk sometimes.
Oh, listen, being a parent is walking a wire, but then being a parent in divorce, I just thank God every day that my husband still loves me every day.
Yeah. I tell Steve if he leaves me, I'm going with him.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. This is a done deal, my friend.
No, there's no negotiation here. Yeah, I'm not having a third divorce in my life.
Yes, like Ross on Friends, like no 3 divorces.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But one of the things that I always, when I talk about like keeping the climate cool, and like when you have somebody who's really, really awful, and then particularly if they're a high conflict personality and all they want to do is fight, I tell my clients this, you do not have to dance at every party you're invited to, right? Like you
right.
have to do that. Sometimes silence is appropriate. Sometimes not responding is appropriate. Sometimes not defending yourself. I mean, 9 times out of 10, when you're dealing with your ex-spouse, don't even bother to defend yourself, because it's not going to result in them saying, aha, you're right, I am wrong. Oh my gosh, I really missed the mark on that. It doesn't happen. But people have this compulsion to want to defend themselves and want to fight. But you have to remember, like, this is not a person who's on your team any longer. This is actually somebody who has juxtaposed themselves as an enemy.
Right.
And so if what you want is validation, which I think, like, how important, like when you went through your divorces, and hopefully I'm not getting too personal, but like, how important was it for you for just somebody to look at that dynamic between you and your ex-spouse and say to you, like, I understand what you were feeling. No, you're not crazy. I hear you. Because in those dynamics where you get to the point where you need a divorce, that person is no longer hearing you. They're not understanding you. They're villainizing you. They think you're the worst person in the world instead of trying to understand where you're coming from. To me, it's so important for clients to feel validated, to understand, yes, what you went through was awful. Yes. That thing that person said or did to you was absolutely terrible. But then you have to be heard and then move past it, because dwelling on it doesn't make sense.
Right. You need to get that validation from someone else.
Yes, but it's never going to come from the ex.
No, it's never going to come from the ex. I mean, I think I later got validation from at least one of them, that he was an ass. But I think you need to surround yourself with people who let you grieve, but also validate that this is a good thing for you.
That's kind of my point, is just like, remember, like, who is on your team, who's in your army, and who isn't. Because when you're at war, like, you don't go to the enemy and tell them your game plan. You don't go to the enemy and share your feelings. That guy doesn't care. And you have to kind of look at it that way. Not to say you should pit yourself against your spouse, because I think that doesn't help, but I'm saying you have to know that person is not on your team, and then remember who is. So if you need to vent, if you get a crazy something from your ex-spouse and it's just so ridiculous and stupid, instead of hitting reply, this is so stupid, how about hit forward to somebody who is in your team or your counselor, right? Forward it and then say, this is so stupid because when you hit reply and you explain why something's stupid, you're going to be entrenched in an argument. You're going to get no validation. You're going to get more blame, more shame, more guilt. Be it forward to somebody who is on your side, is on your team, your mom, your sister, your brother, somebody who's with you. And you say, this is so stupid because X, Y, and Z. What you get back, what that feedback is like, oh my gosh, I know. Oh my gosh, how horrible. And you get all of the bad juju out but you're validated, as opposed to the other way. Now you're entrenched in an argument.
That's 100% true. That's actually why I came up with proper calm.
Yes.
Because,
if you don't see it, you don't feel, you can unlatch. Right.
And so for those of you who don't know, proper calm is a company I came up with that edits emails and text messages with between high conflict families. And we remove the abuse. And the service is free to victims of domestic violence. So there's my little plug.
But I mean, it is, not to belabor the point, but it's such an important function, because you get triggered by what the other person says. And then you have this innate need to defend yourself. I think that's really natural. And I think that's common. And I think that this world tells you that's what you're supposed to do. Stand up for yourself. But what I think is a more powerful tool, and it takes practice, is to be able to sort through what needs to be responded to and what doesn't. And until you can get there, proper comm will do it for you. But eventually, and I like the fact, because if I'm remembering correctly, proper comm will also show you how they've edited.
Yeah, we do. We talk about the edits, and we edit it out. The sender actually receives what they sent, the new version of what they should have sent, some tips on what to do better. And then they have the opportunity to obtain a certificate of appropriate communication, because the goal is to teach.
Yeah.
The goal is to teach people to communicate appropriately. And I always, I have always told my clients, look, you have to at least respond in that you don't agree, but that should be the only response. I received your email, or I received your text. I disagree. Not going to go into it, but I disagree. And then you have yours on the record, as opposed to somebody else then saying, well, they never denied it if you're going to court and trial.
Yeah. Or they ignored me. So that's why I sent 800 more messages.
Right. Yeah.
I know.
That happens. It's terrible, but it doesn't. You haven't responded. You haven't responded. Yeah, I'm not going to respond. But if they just do the once and they say, I received your message, I'm not responding, I disagree, then that's usually what I would have them do.
And the one thing that I think is really important for anybody who's listening to this podcast is just to understand that it's like riding a bike. You don't know how to do it initially. Sometimes you need training wheels. Eventually you learn how to get that balance. And reality is, if you just want to cruise on your bike, you probably never have to learn again. You can just ride the bike. But if you want to get better at it, if you want to become a mountain biker, you want to start doing flips on a turnpike or anything like that, you have to keep working at it, and you have to keep practicing it. It's not a skill that comes naturally to us. I think for the most part, when you look at our amygdala, fight, flight, freeze, mine's forage, by the way. I eat if I'm stressed. But the reality is, we're wired to react. We're very reactive people. And if you're not going to react, you have to train yourself. So anybody listening to this needs to understand, you're not going to hear what Launi and I are saying, and you're all of a sudden going to be better. Right. You have to practice. So there's a lot of forgiveness that you have to give yourself if you fall short of a goal, but don't absolve yourself of having to try, because these are life skills. You can build on them. It is meaningful into the future, because anybody I grew up with in Globe, Arizona, if they're listening to me talk about peace and be a peacemaker and don't fight, I think they would all think I am not myself, because I was really very argumentative, really combative when I was growing up. But I realized it's not functional for being an adult. You actually have to learn, and you feel better by doing better. You feel better with less strife and conflict in your life. And you just have to choose not to dance at every party.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's some people who will take a message and spend hours creating a response to make sure they've addressed every point. And those are hours of your life you're never going to get back.
And the other side is not going to read all the words.
Right.
It's just talk to your friends, get your girlfriends together, get a bottle of good wine and laugh about it. Because the people, I think it was Dr. Seuss who said, there was a line in a book, and it said, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And I thought that was such a powerful quote, because if you believe the junk that's coming out of the other side's, emails or mouths about you, if you are going to believe that, then you're not somebody who should matter to me.
Right.
But the people who matter to you, they don't care about any of that stuff that's being said, because they know who you are. And you always see that. It's stop trying to be friends with those people. Let that go. If people truly care about you, they're not going to think these things about you. Or if they do think them about you, they're going to give you an opportunity, and they're going to work with you, and they're going to be kind, and they're going to be full of grace, and they're going to try to have that relationship. Stop trying to have a relationship with people who don't want to have a relationship with you.
Right.
Focus your
100%.
energy on having the relationships with people who care about you and love you and are going to build you up and going to care about
because you deserve it.
Because you deserve it.
You deserve it. You deserve better. Nobody deserves to be treated like crap.
Really.
And that's so important. And I think going through a divorce really can bring out the worst in people and can bring out even the worst in how they treat themselves. You know, they need to forgive themselves. They need to move on.
Was it Judge Cohen who said that in criminal court you have kind of bad people and they're on their best behavior, but in family law you have really good people but on their worst behavior?
Yeah. And that's 100% true.
That's what this brings out of people.
So speaking of Judge Cohen and courts, what are the issues that you see with the courts that your clients struggle with?
Their expectations, I would say. Again, it's always expectations, but the court system, people like watch Law and Order, or they watch, you know, if you go back, I'm an old soul. I loved Matlock. I loved Perry Mason. You know, you get like kind of a skewed idea of what the court system is about when you watch TV, because it all happens very quickly, right? So
yeah. I always yell at the TV. I'm like, I would love to get into court the next day.
Yeah, wouldn't you? Yeah, so far, no judge has found anything that I've had to say so important that they wanted me in the next day, unfortunately. Yeah. So one of the number one questions I always get asked, I wonder if it's the same for you when you were litigating, but people would always ask me, how long is this going to take? And my answer is always longer than you want. Because that's true across the board. I don't care if it takes 5 days or 32, it's longer than you want it to take.
Right.
Or 320 days. The court system is bad. And I mean, Judge Sheldon, he knows what it's like. Like, can we talk about how hard this job is for judges?
Right? Yeah, I mean, for sure. So Judge Sheldon is my husband. He's a retired judge. Yeah, I would never want to be a judge. I couldn't do it. No. God bless the ones that do, because I don't have that in me.
Yeah. So I try, like, when I'm talking about clients and like trying to help them manage the system, because I think that the length of time is the thing that drives them the most crazy, how long it takes to get into trial, particularly if you have somebody else who's trying to delay the process. You know, oh, discovery and disclosure isn't complete. I know this is the 5th time I've said that, but it's still not done. Sometimes some judges will allow that to happen. And then your marriage that was only 20 months long, the divorce has now taken 26 months, right?
Right.
It can be purely insane in that sense. And it can really cause a lot of angst and anxiety for the client, who just expected this court to be able to know how insane what they're doing on the other side is and to see things the right way. And now here we are 2 years into it and no progress has been made. And sometimes that happens. And so I always tell people, like, this is a reality of court. And I always tell them, judges have between like 800 and 1,000 active cases on their docket at any given time. They don't remember you from Joe Schmo down the street.
And if they do, it's a problem.
It's not a good thing.
If they remember you, there's a bigger issue.
Very bad thing. And honestly, a lot of our judges, like, we're in family court. So when a judge is appointed, they usually first go to family court. I like to think that that's like the court's way of sort of trying to weed out people who really don't want to do this job by like throwing them into the fire right away. You're going to have to deal with crazy, drama. You're going to have to deal with the emotional component. You're going to have to, the rules of procedure or the rules of evidence are sort of out the window, and unless you ask for them to be in the window. And so it's like the wild, wild west family law litigation. So they throw these judges in, and most of them are not family law attorneys. And so they're wholly unfamiliar with the rules of procedure, the laws associated with it, and they have to get like a crash course in it. And then you have complicated issues like the division of retirement accounts and couching, and you have all of these really crazy concepts. There's business valuations, and there's Ruschenberg, and there are all of the Dreyhus. You have these really complicated issues,
and not just issues, but formulas. So there's not a lot of family law attorneys or judges majored in math or accounting or statistics or things like that. And there can be a lot of math in it.
Yeah. And so you think about all of that, and then you walk into a courtroom and you just expect the court to know what to do with your case. And it's not always that way. So you get a crazy ruling. Like, and you and I were talking about when you really care about your clients and you're so empathetic, and you end up in trial anyway, despite whatever efforts you've made to settle. And then the ruling comes out and it's just totally wackadoo. Legal
and
term.
wrong. Like the judge just
and
gets
they don't
it
have
wrong.
The money to appeal. They don't have the money for, a request to reconsider or, anything like that. They literally have to take this ruling and run with it. And it can be like an extremely heartbreaking thing. And so I tell my clients, I tell them specific horror stories. I say, in this instance, the other side was ordered to comply with the custody evaluation, did not comply, didn't show up, didn't pay their retainer. We end up in trial. There is no custody evaluation, and the court still ordered equal parenting time.
Yeah, that's a problem. I mean, that's that's why I'm not practicing, because that's such a problem when you have a problem person who's not even willing to, do that. The court says,
I'm good with this.
Yeah, right? And they have the right to, make the negative inference. It's just they don't.
Yeah. And it's so hard, but that's what makes our job hard. And that's why I always tell them, like, you have to understand that this system is imperfect. We're trying our best, but it's run by a bunch of imperfect humans. And so there's imperfection within this system. And there are ways to get around it. But ultimately, if you end up in trial, the only people who are going to win, assuming they took a large enough retainer, are the attorneys.
Right. That's why, again, I know you're big on mediation. I'm big on mediation. I think, Steve does mediation now.
Yeah.
I think mediation is the way to go. And even hiring a private judge. Because then you have somebody who at least has the experience and also the time, because, you get so little time. And I'm sure that's another issue that you have with your clients is just the small amount of time that they get to present their case, and they want to vent.
Yes.
They want to say what they want to say, but they've been given, 3 hours of which you only get half of, minus whatever the judge takes. So now you're down to like 75 minutes. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to give that to a client. So
if you're going into this and you think that trial is the answer, let me tell you that trial is not the answer. You should avoid trial like the plague, because again, it goes back to like what is within your sphere of control. And when you're in mediation, the result is still within your sphere of control.
Right. And we did have actually Steve's doing a podcast with me next week talking about the benefits of mediation, and Annette Burns did one talking about how to prepare for mediation. Mediation is so important, and it's typically it's like you get two, I don't want to say you don't both lose, but you don't both win. It's kind of a right in the middle, and you're not ecstatic about the outcome, but you're not heartbroken about the outcome either.
David Horowitz, I love when he does his mediation spiel, because at the very beginning he talks about like it's not win-win, it's not win-lose, it's not lose-lose. It's kind of what I can live with and what I can live with. Like that's really like where you want to get with mediation. Because it is really rare. Like I have had instances where I've taken a case to trial and I have won, like 100% won. It's rare for that to happen to any lawyer, but 100% won every issue, got attorney's fees. Got to tell you, still collecting, still trying to get the other side to pay. It's not the benefit that you think it is. It really isn't.
And when you mediate, because when you mediate, you have a say in it. I think that the other side who also had a say in it is more likely to follow the
more
agreement.
motivated to follow through.
Yeah. And I think
There's a
that's a big
specific
part.
structure that's addressed as how you're going to follow through. The other thing that I will say, just kind of going back to the length of time, because I think that is the number one thing that I impress upon my clients. Like, if you are going to do this through the court system, this is going to take a long time. Please don't schedule your marriage to the new person until after the litigation is done. Just please don't do that. Just wait.
Well,
if this new relationship is everything that it's supposed to be, they'll be there once the litigation is done. You don't have to get that thing on the books. But I don't know if that's happened to you, but like I've had one client who has been like, we need to get this done because I have my new wedding scheduled. And I'm thinking to myself, why? But I've had two where literally they had to have their wedding, and it was in such close proximity to when like the trial date was. I feel like maybe they didn't get great advice, but like there was a trial date and then they scheduled their new wedding like 3 days later. And as you know, a court has like 60 days to enter a ruling. So
and they're usually late. So
yeah, you just feel like somebody didn't give them the right advice on that. But how many times is it? And then they have to convert it to a commitment ceremony because it can't be a legal marriage because you're still married to the other side. Just be patient. If you have to go to trial, if you have to follow through on the litigation track, be patient. Just be patient. You're going to feel a lot better.
Another just sort of jumping on that is, if you can keep the new significant other out of the middle of stuff, and even if you can make it so that your soon to be ex doesn't know about the other person, that is way more helpful, I think, than anyone gives it credit for, because that's a trigger. And so that's going to make, they're going to be mad, they're going to be sad, they're going to want to fight. All those emotions that came with the divorce are going to be amplified. Because now there's this new person. It's that trigger is going to be with somebody when there's a new significant other, when the new significant other meets the kids, when there's an engagement, when there's a marriage, when there's a new pregnancy. All of those life events will trigger the soon to be ex. So if you can keep those out of your life, or at least out of the knowledge, away from the knowledge of the other person, that would be really helpful for your case.
Please don't ask my client to copy your new wife, her former best friend, right? Yeah. Like, please don't ask me to have my client copy her on communications like about the children. Like, please don't do that, because it's not, I don't know what point you're trying to prove. It's not making it. And also it's only making everything so much worse.
Oh my gosh.
Happens. And I have people who have like clients who have a new significant other, and they're like, well, I want the other side to respect them. Well, you're not going to get that respect by throwing that person in their face. If you ever want there to be a mellowing out where everybody can be friends, then you need to be respectful about that situation. And that's not throwing that, don't let that person sort of get in there and make their mark. Like, I'm the new sheriff in town. Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, we had
a dynamic that works.
On Proper Com, I had a message come by once that said, the guy called the new wife his new perfect wife or something.
Yeah.
And that's going to be edited out for starters. But, if you don't have an editing tool like Proper Com, you need to edit yourself, because hurting someone's feelings is not going to help your kids. Hurting someone's feelings and making somebody sad about what's going on is absolutely not in the best interest of your kids, because your kids are going to be there, and they're going to see the sadness. They're going to see the frustration. They're going to feel the anger. They're going to feel the sadness. It's not like this is just a one-off thing. You were a jerk to your ex, and so yay for you. This is something that really affects your kids and their desire to want to be around you, because your kids aren't stupid. They know what's going on, and they can read, they're very empathetic to parents typically.
Yeah. And like we talked about before, like even with alienation, like that it's a strange phenomenon, because kids are wired to love their parents, and a lot of self-hatred comes along with you hating the other half of them, and so when alienation occurs, it can only occur when there's a ton of conflict. And it's sad, because often a child loses a meaningful relationship with a parent who cares about them.
Right.
And so, when you're talking about like just keeping the storm quiet and not fighting, don't fight. You don't have to fight. And you don't have to create a situation where somebody feels like they need to fight back. You don't have to, wax lyrical about your new spouse and how great they are. I had one guy where we were talking about standing in the way, and his lawyer had already withdrawn, and he was communicating directly with my client. And I essentially said, okay, you're not going to do that anymore, because he couldn't keep new girlfriend out of his, or new wife, I guess at that point, out of his communications. And then I essentially acted as proper comm in that instance, because he couldn't get him to agree to proper comm. But he would send me an email and he would say, I have to drop off the lacrosse net to your client's house for our son. But unfortunately, my new Porsche is too small.
Yeah.
And so the new SUV that I bought for my new wife will have to be used, and she will have to be the person who drops it off. Can you please ask your client if she's okay with that? And all I wrote to my client was, hey, does your son need a lacrosse net? And she wrote back to me and she said, no, he has one here. And I said, cool. And I just wrote back to him and I said, no, thanks. That was it. She never knew.
Right.
There was all of this. Oh my. And the other thing that you should know, if you are a person who is interested in just sort of sprinkling that kind of information about how great your new life is with your new wife, if you're going to sprinkle that information in your communications, please also know that your children tell the truth about what your relationship is really like. And there are no perfect wives, right? Like if anybody's going to be a perfect wife, I would assume it would be you, Launi.
Of course.
Yes, absolutely. But nobody's a perfect wife. Everybody has their stuff. Everybody has fights. And so when you try to in your communication say, oh, it's so great. And we're like, your kids come home and tell your ex-spouse about how you had to sleep on the couch because we're fighting. And so you just look silly. You look foolish. It's not necessary.
And I think you look foolish for just the fact that you're doing it. I mean, why are you doing it? Are you so insecure that you're doing it? Do you want your ex back so much that you're doing it? Are you trying to punish your ex? Why are you trying to punish your ex? You would only want to punish your ex if you still care. When you become indifferent to your ex, that's when you know you're okay. And so when you're playing all these games, that just means that you got your own issues. But
it doesn't signal security.
No, right? It sure doesn't, right?
Insecurity,
It signals some stuff and maybe some mental health issues too. And then if clients have that and they need proper comm, we do actually have motions available. And to have the courts order them also.
But so how often do you see the court ordering it over the objection of another party? Often?
Often, especially in domestic violence cases, because it is free for the victims. And so especially for that, but I've actually had, one court say, no, I'm not ordering that. And the wife say, I'll pay for both of them. And so the wife paid because she wanted the peace of mind. And it really is. It's like, look, you can pay your attorney. So she was paying you however much an hour, which I'm sure that's quite a bit. More than the $20 email or the $5 text, right? So she can pay you to do that, and it's worth I'm sure it's worth every penny that she pays you to have that peace of mind. To not have to get that email and that text message.
And that's what it was about in that moment.
Right. That's all about that.
And my client was not, she would react, and God bless her, like, I get it, but she was still in that mindset where she could convince him to stop. And I was trying to say, listen, if he truly has the personality issues that we think he may have.
He clearly did.
Your response is supply. Your
Right.
response is only encouraging him to do it more because it's showing him you're affected.
Yeah, it's fuel to the fire on that one. And that's why Megan and Bill Eddy are so great. I do too. Megan should be on the show. She was supposed to be on I think a couple weeks ago, and I had to reschedule. So I'm not sure when she's set for now, but Megan will be on.
And you'll tell her that I'm a huge fan and I love her so much.
I love her. Everybody loves her, but yes,
everybody,
I'll tell her.
I mean, if you don't love Megan, there's something wrong with you.
I know. Okay, so when you get your clients to kind of, when you talk to them about their expectations and you're kind of fixing that, how do you think that helps them deal with the courts?
Well, it helps them simply because they don't get so upset when the thing I said was going to happen happens, right? It's all about managing your expectations. If you expect the court to take a long time, when it takes a long time, you're not disappointed because you expected it to happen that way. But if you're expecting to be done in time for your new wedding to your new spouse and it doesn't happen, then that's when there's the disappointment and the anger and the frustration. And the reality of the situation is that none of us control what happens with the court. We don't control how quickly this is done. We don't control what the court rules. And so it's all about that. What's in your sphere of control? And in your sphere of control is how you feel about a situation. And so if you feel okay with the fact that this is taking a long time, then you're gonna be okay. But if you get irritated about a thing that you cannot control, you can't make it go faster. I have a judge who I've asked for a trial date. I think it's like 4 or 5 times. And this is the 5th time that somebody has asked for an extension because they need to get a business valuation completed. But you've known you've needed this business valuation since February of last year, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be done. You have everything, but the judge keeps granting continuances, and there isn't a darn thing I can do about it. Very frustrating. But this last time when they asked for another extension, we're still waiting to see what the court's going to do. But this last time I didn't get mad when I saw the motion because I knew it was going to come because we didn't have a business valuation yet. So of course they're going to ask for an extension, and I'm not going to be mad if the judge grants another extension because it is what it is. And we've got to ride this ride.
Yeah. And that's really, honestly, since I stopped doing litigation, that's been the one thing I think I've been able to do in my life so much is learn to manage expectations and just not give a shit about most things. Like I care about my family. I care about, my friends and my animals. And I'm thankful for so many things. So if I can live with like that, within that, there's really not much else that I will let get to me anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that.
And you have a choice about whether or not something gets to you. And so I'm a Christian. So my belief system is that everything is going to work itself out the way that it's supposed to. And if things aren't working out the way you want them to, there's a reason for it. And there's something that you're learning in it that's going to inure to your benefit or somebody else's benefit at some point in the future. With or without that belief system, you don't have to be a Christian to think this way, but it's an extremely helpful way to think, because even in hard points, like when you're in the valleys as opposed to on the peaks, like you can know that everything is going to be okay. And that's probably the most common phrase that I say to my clients. Listen, this sucks, but everything is going to be okay. I have a client, actually, hold on one second, because it's right here. I put it up on my little pin board because it was so meaningful. But he said, I just drove by your office while out running errands and thought about stopping in to say hi, but I figure everyone's busy. And with this COVID stuff still going on, I'm never sure who's comfortable with visits these days. Anyway, as I drove by, I had a moment of immense gratitude, reflecting on the nightmare like memories of dragging myself into your office over the many months of the divorce and trying to keep it together while we sorted through things and strategized. I'm so grateful for you guys and all you did for me, your knowledge and skills, the professional way you communicated and handled my case, and also the caring personal touch. Just had to say thank you again for everything. This is my favorite part. My days are much better lately, and while I still have periodic moments of anger and pain, like you kept telling me, Jenica, it's anytime I'm right, really, I put it up on my pin board, but he said, like you kept telling me, Jenica, it's now just a bad memory and I never have to live there again.
Yeah, and with bad memories, remember, you lived through it the first time, you'll live through it the second time and third time that you're remembering it, to get yourself through it.
You'll live through whatever you choose to live through. Like,
right.
Emotionally speaking, you're going to, and it's going to be okay. And it may not be what you think in your head is okay, but it's going to be okay. And the divorce is going to be a bad memory at some point. It just is. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes that tunnel is long.
And it'll seem like, I mean, in my case, it just seems like a lifetime ago, right? You just create a new life without the person in it. And it just is like a lifetime ago. It's almost like you know, it's more than a chapter in a book, it's its own book.
Yeah.
And so you probably had chapters in your marriage. And then you wrapped up that book in the divorce. And now you're creating a whole new book with all new memories. And so yeah, that's great.
But I mean, how much did you learn from it? Like you learn about yourself through the process. Like you can dwell on the negative or you can choose to look at the positive.
I learned that I was not a perfect wife.
Oh, I don't believe it. No,
I read this. So while I was, you know, before the divorce, there's this tape, or it was an Audible that was called Love and Respect. And I was trying to like, have you seen, I think I've even talked to you about it. You
told me about the book. Yeah. And I bought it and I lent it to a client and they never gave it back.
Yeah. I mean, it's so good, but during the time you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. Oh my gosh, I did that. And you realize that, you know, you may not have been perfect. So hopefully you learn from it. I learned a lot from it. I had Steve listen to it before we got married because I thought it just held so true to so many things.
But, you know, and we keep using the term perfect, but, you know, I tell people all the time, it's easy for me to tell you what to do sitting on this side of the desk. Like,
oh, for sure.
You know, with my husband, like, I'm just lucky that he is not divorcing me because I would probably just show out. You know, like I'm an extremely emotional person. I'm half Filipino, and then my dad is white, but his lineage is like Scottish. I'm genetically wired to have like a 3-inch fuse, you know, like anger is my love language, but I know it's not, you know, productive. But there are times where I catch myself doing the exact thing that I tell my clients not to do. Don't engage with this, unlatch. Right. Like you need to remember, like right now is not the time to say this thing. Like, you don't have to say your opinion. You don't have to tell him how you feel right now. He's not interested in how you feel. You have those moments where you're not perfect and expecting perfection from yourself. Or if you're a person who's expecting perfection from the other side, like anytime you're expecting perfection or good behavior, your expectations are out of whack. You need to expect people to behave poorly when there's a divorce, and then you're happy if they don't.
Well, and there's even more, like I hesitate to give a complete example of something that happened in my world, but my ex was doing something that it was clear he was purposefully bothering me. He was purposefully doing something that he knew would piss me off with the kids. And the kids came home and I was pissed off. And the kids came in and, you know, they could tell I wasn't happy. And I thought, I just ruined my night with them. Like I'm 100% responsible for ruining my day with them. And I thought, I'm not doing that ever again. Yeah. I'm just always going to be thankful.
Yeah.
And that's really where you have to do the switch. You have to do the switch. And listen, it happened throughout the rest of the time until my kids were adults.
Yeah.
That, you know, I believe things were done purposefully to just get under my skin.
Yeah.
But if it's interesting, if you don't let it get to you, and if you're just appreciative of sort of how it goes, then you get control again.
Yeah.
And it feels like you have control again. And that's what I had the problem with, is not being able to sort of control what was happening. And when I was, parenting times not being followed and blah, blah, blah. But if you change your own perspective on that, that's like, okay, well, my kids came home fed. If I'm going to look at it that way, instead of the fact that they're 3 hours late.
Yeah. Or Launi, if they're 3 hours late and they didn't come home fed, like, thank God they're here. I love my kids. And thank God I have the skill set necessary to cook some macaroni and cheese and get these kids fed. Again, it's what's in your sphere of control, and your perspective is within your sphere of control.
And you can make it happy for them. You can make it, you can change and go, okay, well, are you guys hungry? Well, then what do you want? Let's get something fun. You want to help me in the kitchen? And you can make it such a positive experience. I had the one negative one and I just never did it again. I was just like, this is not fair for my kids.
That was like the moment that the training wheels off, right?
Right. Yeah, 100%. That's what I think. Mountain biking. I think that was a mountain biking.
Yes, yeah, actually, you're right. You're right. I did not nail that analogy. Right there.
that was a mountain biking one, because it was just such a difference, and it never happened again. I can tell you there were other times where I could have been really, really upset, interfering with birthdays or holidays, or, like Christmas Eve, service at church, or things like that. And I just made the choice not to do it, not to go down that road. And it is so
liberating.
That's the word. It's so liberating. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, you feel like you've got control back. And so for the people who need the control and are losing the control, that really gives you that, because you're controlling yourself, your emotions, and you're making it a really fun, great time anyway, despite,
you're unaffected.
Right. And the kids are better for it because they don't know.
And then if you're not affected, then the other side moves on.
Right. Well, no, still didn't. Still didn't.
Oh, but never mind.
Yeah, still didn't, but that's okay, because it didn't matter. I can only control me and what I could do and my abilities. And so lowering your expectations of someone is great. Changing your just belief system and your response system, was really what helped me.
So, and I know that we have not a lot of time. I know that we probably need to wrap up soon, but one thing that I was going to ask you, is just like a thought popped in my head while we were talking, but how much of what you have either experienced personally, or how much of what you have seen, like clients who can't unlatch from that dynamic go through, is because they don't want to let the other person off the hook. They think that by being happy or not being upset about their violation of the clear terms of a decree, or their failure to do something correctly, lets them off of some proverbial hook.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's, it's a lot of people just have a difficult time with that.
Like, you want to hold them accountable, or they want
to. And you get angry and you, send a stupid email or a stupid text, or, when we hang up here, I'm going to tell you the story that I'm talking about, because it was an interesting one, because the new significant other was involved in it. And so, but yeah, I think a lot of it is, when somebody does that and you're not controlling yourself, then all bets are off. I mean, you might want to go back to court. You're going to send nasty emails. Your kids are going to feel it.
Yeah.
They're going to know every part of it. They're going to be affected. And it really comes down to, I think most people love their kids and want what's best for their kids, and are just unable to do what's best for their kids.
Yeah.
And I think they just don't get how bad it is for the kids. And I actually am going to try and have my daughter on, and have her talk about the divorce.
That's so interesting.
I don't want her to go into anything, but I want her to talk about how the divorce has affected her and things. And I'm trying to get other people who've gone through it, adults now that have gone through it. I don't want her to badmouth her dad or anything, but I would just want her to understand the the
Yeah,
difficulty when
or it's
parents
saying,
don't understand. I mean,
yeah,
look, I think their dad loves them more than anything.
yeah,
I just think that he's not in tune with certain aspects. And I think that's where the problem comes in when parents aren't in tune with the kids' needs. Sometimes it just makes it more difficult for the kids,
well,
not intentionally.
yeah, and I think so. Like I think about, because I'm a child of an intact family. Like my parents met on December 7th, and then they got married on March 7th, and they've been married ever since. They met at church, of course.
Yeah,
So I've not, and I never really experienced my parents arguing. Like I don't remember seeing them in conflict with one another, like ever. And I don't know if that was like a healthy way to grow up, or if I could have gained like a little bit more perspective if I had ever seen like interpersonal conflict between them. But I'm grateful for what I had, and everybody has a story, and everybody's
right.
story has got them to where they are, and you have to just be grateful. But with like for me, when I think about like when I'm in conflict with my husband, for example, and I can get in a way where, like, really what I need is to feel better. And it's not that I don't care about how he feels, or it's not that I don't love him, but like, it's like my amygdala. It's like
Right.
I need something, and sometimes I can't unlatch. And I wonder how much of that is true when it relates to like a parent-child relationship, like where you can know that something maybe isn't good for your kids, but because you're a human and you have these emotions and you're wired a certain way, like in this moment, you're just not doing yourself any favor, or you haven't learned how to ride the bike yet.
Yeah, and that might be it. You just don't know how else to be. You
Yeah.
don't know how else to exist. And that's probably true. Again, I believe most parents, want good,
What's best for
love
their
their kids and wants what's best. And they just are struggling, figuring it out. And I've been there. And I think you need to work on you. You can't work on somebody else anymore. You're divorced.
Yeah. And for me, like I'm not a child of a divorce. Like my grandparents on both sides were married forever, like there's a lot of like perspective that I don't necessarily have, because I don't have experience. Like you either learn from experience or instruction.
Right.
So everything
Right.
I think and know about what it's like to be in a divorced relationship or a child of divorce is all from instruction. That's not from experience.
Yeah. And I think
But
I think also a lot of it's somebody, people are scared, when, especially if you were a stay-at-home mom and now you had, this money available and now you don't, and you don't know how you're going to survive, or you're working
yeah,
60 hours a week and you never had to do that before. And, so now you've got this fear of, how am I going to support myself and my kids with, somebody who's not being a good co-parent, and you're frustrated and you're angry and you're sad, and it takes a lot to get through that sometimes. And I think when you have the fear and the sadness and the loss, I think it just exacerbates it.
sure. And that's part of why my point, what like the phrase that I'm always saying is, it's going to be okay. Like
Yeah.
everything is going to be okay. It may not be the okay you're thinking in your mind right now, but it's all going to be okay. And eventually this moment in time is going to be a bad memory. And eventually you're going to send me an email and you're going to tell me I was right. That's what happens. It's all going to be okay. But that's
Yeah.
again, whether it's a dogma from your religious background, or it's just a choice you make to believe that, you control your mind and you control your feelings, no matter how much it feels like you don't, because I'll testify to that. There's a lot of times where I feel really out of control with like my anger or my sadness, like, but I have to remind myself over and over again. And I find myself telling my daughter that too. Well, we can choose to be happy. Well, we can choose not to be sad. Like, I understand being sad, but you have a choice. You can continue to be sad, or you could find things that you could be happy about, or we could find things that we could learn from the situation. That really simplistic view, it's true. And every single person controls their feelings, and you control your expectations, and you control your reactions. And a lot of what this process will do is a really, really great opportunity to train you how to do that. And the skills you learn in the divorce litigation, you can use in the outside world. So,
Yeah, that's true. All
It's
right.
a
Well, thank
pleasure
you
being
so
here.
much for being here, Jenica. I know
No,
we ran over
absolutely.
time.
I know. Sorry.
No, it's great. So for everyone who stuck around this long, I will be posting Jenica's website information below, and in case you want to get a hold of her. So thank you so much, Jenica.
No, thank you, Launi, for having me. I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk. I like to talk, so
Thank you.
thanks.